Thanks, everyone, for having me. Thank you, NETWAYS. So today's talk is about, as you can see, it's scaling up, not out, managing enterprise demands in a growing SaaS startup. So I'm Vishwa. I'm one of the co-founders of a dev tool startup called ZenDuty. I go into work every day working with people like you, production engineers, site reliability engineers, and help you manage your production incidents that aligns with your business and service level objectives. So I have about over 13 years of engineering experience. Recently, I've moved on from engineering to more of a product and an operations role. Usually, I speak about incident management, about choosing the right metrics, about setting up SRE best practices. Today's talk is a little different. We're in Berlin today. It's one of the startup capitals of the world. I thought today would be a good chance to share some of my learnings as an operator, especially in the dev tool SaaS space, mostly around the early stage challenges, right? When you're building a SaaS company, when you're building maybe even a dev tool company or any other vertical SaaS company, what are the scale challenges that you face in the early stages? So, this session is mostly for people who are either founders now. A lot of you might start a company or a product company in the near future, or if you're part of a founding team in the early stages. So when I say early stages, it's mostly pre-product market fit. These are most of the learnings that I've distilled from my own experience and from the experience of a lot of founders that have been around me. And a small caveat: the learnings are mostly from companies that are chasing venture growth. So these are all really fast-moving companies with its own set of scale challenges. Do you know which company that is on the right, by any chance? Does anybody know that? You look at the colors. Oh, okay. That's Slack, by the way. And they scale really quickly. So let's begin, right? So if you're a founding engineer of any SaaS company, I think day zero basically defines your next year, right? It's you start with your founder vision, the problem that you're trying to solve, the end users for which you're solving the problem, the industry for which you're solving the problem. You choose a very highly focused audience, that is your ideal customer profile, the company size, the revenue, the location, the industry. Then you know exactly who's going to make the decisions when they're buying your software, right? So the goal of your day zero, the decisions that you make on day zero, is to choose a very highly focused audience that want to buy your product today. Now, the decisions that you take on the very first day of your company impacts every single department, right? Specifically, the stack that you choose on day one, the architecture that you have, the overall cost that's fixed plus variable, right? Your short-term and long-term product roadmap, your go-to-market, and of course your delivery and support. So in the early stages, at least from an engineering perspective, this is something that we all need to internalize, right? So if you're building before or pre-PMF, it's all about sort of figuring out whether your company even deserves to exist. And until product market fit, everything from an engineering standpoint, what we need to focus on is to make sure that we have enough flexibility to test every single hypothesis that we can, right? So that we can find product market fit as soon as possible. Now, what is product market fit, right? Where do you want to see your SaaS go to, right? This is a stage where you're scaling up, and once you get to product market fit is when you're sort of scaling out, right? So you want to get to a stage where you have a true value proposition that is differentiated. You have really high growth. You have product momentum. You have very high customer satisfaction. You have very low customer churn. And you have a repeatable sales motion. So that is the promised land for every single young company that is sort of striving for venture scale, right? So until that point, until all of those conditions are satisfied, we are all just experimenting. We are all sort of trying to be as flexible as possible, right? Now, in the early stages, if you're building a product and if you're doing operations, if you're doing development, the goal is to help your go-to-market teams unlock newer customer segments. That means that we need to be flexible from an engineering standpoint. We need to be able to adapt to certain kinds of customers. Maybe you started with an emphasis on small, medium businesses, but then you sort of suddenly realize that, hey, we are finding traction in enterprises, right? So the architecture changes completely. Now, your go-to-market teams will sort of show up with customers that are 5x, 10x, 50x larger than your biggest customers, what do you do then, right? And how are you going to be prepared for it? That is exactly the kind of scale challenges that at least the early stage companies face. And if you're not prepared to sort of face that kind of scale, and if you try to do it, I mean, you can't say no to any kind of growth, unless it's completely justified, unless it can kill you. But then if you try to solve for that kind of scale in the short term, then you're in for a world of pain. And these are some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So you see a lot of these SaaS companies over here, they took a long time to get to product market fit, right? So the product, the architecture, the operations, everything, at least, I mean, right now it's getting much longer to get to product market fit, right? Engineering teams have to experiment with different kinds of customer sizes. You may start with a SaaS that's focused on a specific industry, but then you find traction in industry that is highly regulated, so you need to adapt your software for that. So getting to product market fit now it's taking longer. The time to experimentation, the time to scale, the time to build is actually getting longer, right? But once you get there, then it's all about scaling out. So whenever your go-to-market teams, when they're experimenting, they're all experimenting in this quadrant, right? You can start with you can build software for smaller businesses. It's relatively easy, versus building for the enterprises, right? And growth can come in any of these categories. And in the early PMF stages, you're pretty much trying to find growth in any of these categories, right? So when we are experimenting with different kinds of customers, of different scale of customers, or customers across different industries, if you look at these three segments, all right. Let's say you started off with building for a solution for a large fintech, right? And then you realize that, hey, the sales cycle it's taking much longer, and therefore we might find, get better traction. We might be able to close deals faster with smaller businesses, right? But then your enterprise software now needs to be managed now needs to scale down to a small fintech, right? Mid-size versus enterprise. It completely changes your deployment model. It completely changes your tenancy model, right? So are we prepared to go there is the question, right? And whenever you start getting traction from different adjacent ICPs, your ideal customer profiles, you need to make sure as operators that you need to be open to changes in architecture, in your product roadmap, in the GTM motion, and delivery and support. So a lot of the times when I've interacted with founders who started with building SaaS for smaller businesses, right? They move to enterprises sooner than later, and the one challenge that they face from an engineering standpoint is to get to enterprise readiness, right? So it's always something that they thought they could have baked in from day one, but then if you start getting enterprise traction, then you need to get to enterprise readiness ASAP, right? And I'm gonna discuss how you can do that in just a bit. Once you start getting bigger customers, then you'll have to carefully evaluate exactly what kind of feature creep you can tolerate, right? Because the demands of enterprise customers versus a mid-market customer is going to be significantly different. And dev and ops need to prepare well in advance to accommodate a customer that is 10x, 20x bigger than your biggest customer. So this happens very often, especially for a product that's delivering some kind of value, but then you start getting traction from a customer that you're not really prepared for. So it goes as follows. Hey, we've served a bunch of small customers. It's absolutely stable. We're very able to scale. But then now we got this really big behemoth that wants to go live with our product in 10 days. Can you get all of this done right now, right, so that we can sign the deal? Now, as an operator or as a developer, how would you react to something like this, right? When GTM comes to you and tells you something like this, and the question is, should we have been prepared from day one? So scaling up in the early stages. The one thing that a lot of people who have successfully scaled, a lot of teams that have successfully scaled, have done is they've internalized exactly what the product's value framework is, right? Exactly what is the value that we are delivering to our customers, what is the current and future pain points, combine that with the market research to figure out exactly how we are solving it, how do we address it in a way that is sufficiently differentiated in the market, and then finally, how do you capture that value and how do you measure that value, right? In terms of increased revenue, in terms of cost savings, risk mitigation, or time to market. As a company, it's not just the founders and the go-to-market teams that need to internalize this. Actually, the entire organization, right? Including the engineering organization. So once you do this, once we know exactly where our customers are headed, what their usage patterns are going to be like, if we know our go-to-market team's plans well in advance, if we know that, hey, maybe we are serving a certain size of customers right now, we might serve a different size of customer 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line. That's going to make a big difference, in our preparedness. So alignment between the go-to-market team and the product engineering team needs to be there, and they need to be absolutely aligned. Right? So the first thing that you'll want to do, especially when you're experimenting with different kinds of customers, is you need to segment them either by industry or by size, right? Then you move into the product planning, operations planning, then customer onboarding, implementation support, and then finally you have a feedback loop that goes into your product iterations. So GTM and product engineering, of course, cannot. The reason why a lot of startups fail to capture that enterprise scale is because engineering and GTM have been working in silos, right? So one hand does not know what the other hand is doing, right? So you introduce a different kind of scale or a different set of problems to engineering and expect them to solve in a week or two. That's not going to happen, right? And that's what probably kills the growth. Maybe not kill the company, but that really kills the growth. And of course, understanding your overall limits. So I've distilled a lot of the line items that we need to consider from day one, right? In terms of what kind of scale can we handle is the question, right? What kind of performance testing do we have in place? So performance testing will basically help you figure out exactly what kind of customers and what scale of customers and what, in terms of ingestion, in terms of APIs, in terms of rate limits, what kind of traffic can you actually support? That your perf testing would be crucial to introduce from day one, right? Availability and redundancy planning comes into place when you're going after enterprises. They would expect you to be available in multiple regions. Maybe if you're a mission critical tool, you may need to be available in multiple clouds as well, right? Data security. Actually, I should have put data security and compliance as the first item, because that is truly a low-hanging fruit. If you're able to bake security and compliance from day one, then it's much easier to operate than to think about it, a few months or a year down the line when you're actually already when you're already live with a few customers. Cost management and unit economics is also something that startups mostly ignore, or younger teams mostly ignore, because the focus is mostly on development velocity and on getting things to market fast. And unit economics is probably something that they'll consider after they hit PMF. But if you're experimenting with different kinds of customers or different sizes of customers, you need to actually have a good idea of what the unit economics would be for customers of different sizes. And once you start onboarding bigger customers, the maintaining development velocity becomes absolutely critical, right? So they would expect you to either get to feature parity with something that they're already using, internal or external, or they would want to solve more problems with your solution, which means that even though the complexity is increasing, you need to make sure that the development velocity stays either intact or it gets better, right? Monitoring of customer tenants is also super critical. Again, I would say it's a subset of the cost management and unit economics line item. Figuring out exactly how much resources a specific customer is utilizing, whether we are able to serve their traffic in a reliable manner, and what is the cost incurred per operation or per customer. And finally, especially when you start going after customers that are a magnitude higher than the kind of customers that you're used to, you'll probably need to face the noisy neighbor mitigation, especially if you have a multi-tenant model. you'll have to pre-plan for the noisy neighbor problem as well, right? So if a specific customer starts taking more resources than they should, affecting the performance of affecting the user experience of other customers, that will really kill your business. So when you evaluate all of these line items, right, the final question is how adaptable is your stack to any material changes in ICP. So when your founders or when your go-to-market teams come to you, that's probably the one question that's always on top of my mind. Can I go after a different kind of customer, right? Are we adaptable? Are we, at least from a data security standpoint, are we good? Can I maybe, if I'm a horizontal SaaS company, I'm serving, let's say, SaaS, but then I want to move to fintech. Are we compliant on the security and on the compliance side of things? So the more adaptable your stack, the faster you can get to product market fit, and even faster to scale. So this is something that a lot of pre-PMF companies follow, and it's from a site called enterpriseready.io. I think any of you that if you're planning to start a software company, it's always good to get to enterprise readiness as much as possible from day one. So I separated these line items into two categories. There are stuff that you can bake in from day one, and then there are items that you can sort of build on the fly, depending on the customer feedback, right? So tenancy has to be decided on day one. Audit logs, GDPR, and even your product security and certifications. I think you can implement that on day one itself. Right? Whereas product assortment, RBAC, stuff like deployment options, SLA and support is something that I think you can build on the fly. So the one aspect of, and again, from an engineering standpoint, I think most engineering teams have been able to successfully navigate scale, but the only difference is that if you're not sufficiently prepared, then it will just take you longer to scale, and that can sort of make or break your venture, right? I want to talk a little bit about the product side of things, right? So I'm not sure how many of you are operators, and how many of us are operators right now over here, and developers. Okay, so I'm guessing roughly about a 50-50 split. So from a product engineering and development standpoint, I think by and large all of us get it right. The only thing that I see us, at least in the early stages, toying with is feature creep, right? You start saying yes to everything, and that really increases your complexity, the complexity of everything that you ship, the complexity of all of your ops, right? So I've just distilled this one problem. There's like a whole different stuff which pretty much we're able to solve, but feature creep is something that I'm seeing everywhere, right? So it's at the end of the day, if a large enterprise customer is adding 20-30% to your top line, you want that customer, yes, they'll have a big say, or they'll want to have a big say in your product, but you need to come up with a framework that measures the impact of their feature requests or their requirements at a broader level, right? So one framework that has really worked is, again, start with the segmentation. You segment your customers into different types by size, by industry. And once you segment, everything comes down to your happiness index, or if it's measurable, it's CSAT, right? If you're shipping something new, what is the value to each segment? It's not value to the entire customer base, it's value by segment. So there are certain things that may be a one-off, which we should not be shipping, at least not now, until we get more feedback, more focused feedback from other customers. And then there are features that are broadly needed and will add to your happiness or your CSAT index. And then I think finally, I'll probably just end with scaling support. While we're able to scale our products very efficiently, I think there's so much work that's been done, proprietary and in open source, that allows us to navigate, at least from an operational scale standpoint, we're able to navigate these problems with a comparatively, a fair amount of ease. But one area where I'm seeing a lot of challenges in terms of scaling, in terms of scaling up, is scaling support. Right? So you're able to scale all of your products, you're able to scale your operations, but you're not able to scale your support, right? And now I think, at least from a dev tool standpoint, we are seeing that at least 80% of all of the product queries, or product problems, need to be sort of on self-support. If a customer is facing an issue with your software, they need to be able to sort of figure out those issues by themselves. At least 80% of those tickets need to be on self-support or AI-led or documentation-led. There's a very heavy focus now on maintaining, absolutely awesome documentation, videos, and search functionality that can literally make or break your software. There's a focus on self-onboarding as well. And of course, when you're onboarding bigger customers, I think a one-to-many, and engineering and ops also now, at least at the early stages, are a big part of the support function. So we are seeing patterns where you have dedicated teams for certain accounts. So that's a one-to-many model, and ensuring that you have all the industry training and cross-functional problem solving that's baked into your onboarding process. So these are just some of the major challenges that I've seen from a scale perspective in the early stages. I've distilled, I would say, the top 80 percentile of all the problems, and happy to hear any questions. If you are an early stage, maybe a founding team engineer or a founder yourself, would love to learn. If you have any questions, happy to take them. Thanks.
Are there any questions? Too far away. You go.
One question. You said in the presentation that the features for the customers should not be implemented if it does not attach profit over 90%. So in some cases, I think it depends also on the spends, how much you are investing in marketing and so on. And if the customer integration in your application is the key, so I think it's possible to spend more money for the integration and to spend less for the marketing.
I would say it can go either way. See, if an integration is perfect, in your case, in this specific case, if an integration is critical for all customers, it will increase it'll bump up this chart, right? So you've segmented all of your customers. If that integration is going to increase the satisfaction and maybe even increase the contract value for customers, this chart's going to go up. So if it goes up, then yes. The answer to the question is yes, you should go ahead with implementing that integration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Okay, so take care. Perfect.
Hey.
Yo.
Thanks for the presentation. I maybe will sound silly, but do you miss writing code?
Sorry?
Do you miss writing code? Because what you're saying, it sounds very interesting. But
I still write code. I still write code on a daily basis. I'm an engineer turned operator. This is in fact my very first non-engineering presentation. It probably even sounded like that. But no, I write code on a daily basis, mostly on solutions engineering, earlier on product engineering. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We have 5 minutes. I would say no for now.
Break for
but
lunch
you're
early.
around. You can catch with you up later.
Yep.
So again, thank you very much for your talk.